Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku and Iron Man built a new hero society together? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The rain over Muzitiful wasn't the cleansing kind. It was a choking, miserable drizzle that clung to the air like a shroud, turning the neon signs of the few still open businesses into bleeding watercolors against the bruised twilight sky. The asphalt wept, its cracks and fissures sighing with the chill of late autumn. This was the city Izuku Midoriya had sworn to protect, a city that now looked at him and his kind with a mixture of desperate hope and profound fear. He stood atop a 10-story office building, the tattered green fabric of his costume hood plastered to his hair. The suit, once a symbol of his bright future, was now a patchwork of repairs, a testament to a war that had been won at a cost so steep it felt like a loss. The Vigilante Deku arc, as the press had sensationally dubbed it, was over. He was back within the reinforced walls of UA High, sleeping in a dorm room instead of a grimy alley. But the sense of isolation had followed him home. It was a cold, heavy stone in his gut, a constant reminder of the heroes who weren't coming back, of the public trust that had shattered like glass. A shiver, independent of the cold, traced its way down his spine. His bones ached with a phantom memory of broken limbs and brutal impacts. He flexed his scarred fingers, the metal braces of his gauntlets cool against his skin. Every night the ghosts of the past paraded behind his eyes, Sir Night's final, prophetic gaze, Midnight's silenced laughter, the look of pure terror on the faces of civilians who saw him not as a savior, but as the eye of a hurricane. They were right to be afraid. Wherever he went, destruction followed. One for all hung beneath his skin, a reactor core powered by the spirits of its previous wielders. It no longer felt like a torch passed to him in hope, but a crushing mantle of responsibility he was terrifyingly ill-equipped to bear. He could feel them sometimes, the vestiges, not as clear voices but as echoes of feeling, Nana Shimura's sorrow, Yoichi's defiant spark, the quiet pragmatism of the second and third users. They were a constant, low-level thrum of expectation. Do better. Be stronger. Do not fail as we did. His gaze swept over the streets below. The damage from the Paranormal Liberation War was still visible everywhere. A shop that used to sell All Might Silver Age merchandise was boarded up, its faded "I am here" decal peeling away like a sunburn. Craters in the road were haphazardly filled, creating uneven scars on the city's face. The monolithic infrastructure of Hero Society, once thought to be indestructible, had proven to be a facade. It was a reactive system, a network of individual, overworked celebrities tasked with stopping tidal waves with buckets. And the wave had finally been too big. A flicker of emerald lightning danced over his knuckles as he channeled a fraction of his power, just enough to warm his chilled limbs. 5%. A comforting, manageable heat. He remembered a time when this much power would have shattered his bones. Now, he could comfortably handle 45%, a level of strength that felt less like a part of him and more like a borrowed weapon he was barely qualified to wield. His focus sharpened. It wasn't a thought or a sound that alerted him, but a strange, discordant prickle at the base of his skull. His danger sense. But it was odd, not the usual sharp spike of immediate physical threat, but a nauseating, twisting sensation, like the air itself was turning sour. It was coming from 2 blocks east, in the semi-abandoned industrial district. Without a second thought, Deku pushed off the ledge. He didn't use his full power, instead opting for a controlled combination of float and a 20% shoot-style leap. He sailed through the rain-slicked air, the wind a low whistle past his ears. He landed silently on the roof of a warehouse, the soles of his iron-clad boots making only a soft thud. Below, the source of the disturbance was immediately apparent. The front of a building marked Cybercore Dynamics, a defunct tech startup, had been blown outwards. It wasn't the fiery, concussive blast he was used to. The edges of the gaping hole in the wall were strangely smooth, almost melted, and the air around it shimmered like a heat haze on a summer road, distorting the falling rain. Inside, a man was frantically working on a monstrous machine. He was gaunt, clad in a grease-stained jumpsuit, his face illuminated by the device's unholy purple-black glow. The machine itself was a Frankenstein's monster of stolen parts, industrial capacitors bolted to a salvaged server rack, thick cables snaking across the floor like metallic pythons, and at its heart, a pulsating, roughly cut crystal that seemed to drink the light from the room. This was the villain. Deku's mind, the analytical engine honed by years of obsessive study, kicked into gear. Quirk, unknown, likely technology-based or energy manipulation. Motive, appears focused on the device. Not actively causing public harm, but the energy output is dangerously unstable. Danger sense is still screaming. This thing is a bomb. Stop what you're doing. Deku's voice boomed, amplified by his mask. The villain, Glitch as he would later be known, spun around, his eyes wide with a manic terror. No! Not yet! They said it was impossible. They called me a lunatic. I just need to stabilize the gateway. Gateway? Deku's eyes widened. He wasn't building a weapon. He was trying to open something. The shimmering distortion around the device intensified, the low hum rising to a painful, grating whine. The floor vibrated. It's overloading. The villain shrieked, fumbling with the control panel that sparked violently. It's going to collapse. Collapse didn't sound good. Deku's danger sense went from a prickle to a full-blown ice pick stabbing into his brain. An uncontrolled collapse of that much-dimensional energy. It wouldn't just level the building. It could unravel this entire city block. There was no time for negotiation. No time for a gentle takedown. F.A. Gene, he thought, storing kinetic energy with 2 quick, barely perceptible steps. The power coiled in his muscles. One for all, 45%. The green lightning exploded around him, a stark, vivid contrast to the sickly purple of the machine. He crouched low. Delaware. He needed to strike the power source, the crystal, with enough force to shatter it and break the circuit, but with enough precision to avoid hitting the unstable containment field directly. It was like threading a nuclear needle in a hurricane. Smash! He launched himself forward. The world became a blur of motion and emerald light. The villain screamed. Time seemed to stretch, the milliseconds drawing out as his fist, wreathed in crackling energy and tendrils of black whip that had unconsciously manifested for stability, flew towards its target. The moment his gauntlet struck the crystal, 2 worlds collided. Tony Stark was trying to outrun ghosts. He was hidden away in his Malibu workshop, the one rebuilt with more money and hubris than the last. The Pacific Ocean was a dark, restless sheet outside the panoramic windows, but he wasn't looking. His world was confined to the holographic interfaces floating around him. AC/DC's Thunderstruck was blaring at a volume that would make a rock god wince, but he barely heard it. He was tinkering. It was what he did. When the world was too loud, too quiet, too full of faces he could never see again, he built things. Tonight's obsession was a theoretical Mark IV arc reactor, one that would run on zero-point energy, a self-sustaining, perfectly clean power source. It was impossible, of course, but impossible was just Tony's warm-up. Sir, your heart rate is elevated by 18%, a Faraday-wise calm voice cut through the music. I recommend a hydration break and perhaps decaffeinated coffee. Not now, Friday, Tony mumbled, rotating a schematic of a containment matrix. I'm on the edge of a breakthrough or a very expensive paperweight. He was lying. The breakthrough wasn't close. He was just pushing buttons, running simulations, trying to drown out the memory of a gauntlet snapping, of Natasha's empty place at the table, of the cold weight of a victory that cost him his family. That's when the first alarm blared, a shrill, piercing sound that cut straight through Angus Young's guitar solo. Dimensional shear anomaly detected. Red lights flashed across his displays. What the hell? Tony straightened up. Friday report. Did one of strange spooky little portals decide to open up in my linen closet? Negative, boss. The energy signature is not magical in nature. It's technological. And it's originating from inside the workshop. Before Tony could process that, a section of the air in front of him began to shimmer. It was like looking through warped glass. The holographic displays flickered and died. The music cut out, replaced by a deep, gut-wrenching hum that vibrated in his teeth. Gravitational and spatial metrics are, well, they're wrong, F.R.ID.A.Y. Reported, her voice tinged with the closest thing to digital panic Tony had ever heard. It's like a localized black hole with none of the fun mass. I advise immediate evacuation. Evacuate my own lab? Not on the menu. Tony's mind was racing, already trying to diagnose the problem. A wave of force, not physical but spatial, slammed into him. It felt like the universe was trying to turn him inside out. Tools flew off their racks, not towards a central point, but in bizarre, looping arcs. The shimmering distortion coalesced, darkening into a ragged, violet-black tear in reality. It wasn't a neat circle like a sorcerer's portal. It was a wound, bleeding raw, chaotic energy. And it was pulling. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Tony braced himself against the workbench as a tidal wave of gravitational force latched onto him. His feet slid across the polished concrete floor. External force exceeds thruster compensation. No kidding! He grunted, the metal of the bench groaning under his grip. On the other side of the portal, he caught a fleeting, nonsensical image, a rain-drenched room, a terrified man, and a flash of brilliant green lightning. Then, the world screamed. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling, the shriek of physics being torn apart and rewritten. The bench was ripped from its bolts. Tony, caught in the pull, was dragged inexorably towards the vortex. Deploy! Now! He roared. From its alcove, the sleek, red and gold form of the Mark 85 launched towards him. Nanites swarmed from its housing, a liquid metal river that flowed over his body, covering his casual clothes in a second skin of armor. The helmet clicked shut, the HUD flickering to life just as he was pulled into the screaming abyss. His last sensation of his own world was the FRIDAY's frantic, fading voice. Boss. Connection lost. And then, nothing but a vertigo-inducing tumble through a kaleidoscope of color and noise. The explosion was silent. One moment, Deku's fist was about to connect. The next, the world inverted. A wave of purple and black energy erupted from the crystal, not as a blast, but as a bubble. It passed through him, through the walls, through everything. For a microsecond, he felt his atoms being pulled apart and reassembled. There was a deafening roar that existed only in his head, and then, silence. The device was dead, its crystal a spiderweb of cracks, its glow extinguished. The villain, Glitch, was slumped on the floor, unconscious. The rain still pattered against the broken windows. Everything was eerily still. Deku stood panting, the green lightning receding into his skin. He'd done it. He'd stopped it. But his danger sense was still thrumming. The threat wasn't gone. It had changed. The air where the device had been began to warp again. Not with the same sickly purple, but with a new, chaotic energy. It tore open, a jagged black rift about 8 feet tall, spitting sparks of pure static. And out of it, a figure was thrown. It landed in a 3-point stance, one fist and both feet cracking the concrete floor. It was a man, or at least man-shaped, encased in a suit of impossibly sleek, powerful-looking armor painted in the colors of a setting sun, crimson and gold. A glowing blue circle shone from its chest. Deku's hero-nerd brain, even in the midst of his shock, flickered with a single thought. Is that an American hero? I've never seen that armor design. The craftsmanship is flawless. Then the figure stood up. Its head, a smooth golden faceplate with glowing blue eyes, swiveled and locked onto him. Inside the suit, Tony Stark's world was a cacophony of errors. Warning, external atmosphere composition unknown. Warning, local energy grid unrecognized. Warning, chronometric anomaly detected. Analyzing. Unknown biological energy source detected. Power level, critical. Stability, volatile. His HUD highlighted the kid in the tattered green costume. The boy was the epicenter of the readings, a walking reactor of bizarre, multifaceted energy. Green lightning, faint traces of it, still danced around him. And those black, whip-like things, his sensors had tagged them as a separate, psionically projected energy form. To Tony, the conclusion was simple and immediate. This kid, this rabbit-eared reject from a post-apocalyptic metal band, was the cause of the anomaly. He was a human bomb. All right, Sparky, Tony's voice, metallic and amplified, echoed in the warehouse. Party's over. Power down before you pop and take the whole hemisphere with you. Deku blinked. Power down? This person thought he was the villain? Wait. You don't understand. Deku held up his hands, a universal gesture of peace. I'm a hero. I was stopping him. He gestured to the unconscious glitch. Tony's scanners barely registered the man on the floor. His threat assessment protocols were screaming about the kid. Yeah, I've heard that one before. Usually right before they level a city block. Fridy, is that her name now? Let's go with Friday-chan, seems appropriate. Set repulsors to non-lethal, wide beam stun. Affirmative, boss. A new, slightly synthesized version of his AI's voice replied, rebuilt from a core memory file. The palms of the armored suit lit up. Deku's eyes widened. He had no time to explain. He had to move. He used FA gene in a short, explosive burst, not to attack, but to dodge. He shot to the side just as two beams of brilliant blue-white energy lanced through the space where he'd been standing, leaving scorched circles on the wall behind him. Fast, Tony noted, his targeting system already recalculating. And agile. Please, listen to me. Deku yelled, landing in a low crouch. His instincts, honed in 100 battles, told him this opponent was leagues beyond any street-level thug. This was tactical, intelligent, and powerful. There's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding is you thinking you can walk away from this, Tony retorted, a compartment in his shoulder sliding open. A cluster of micro-missiles popped out. Last chance, Jolly Green Giant. Stand down. Deku's mind raced. He couldn't let those missiles launch. Not in here. The unconscious villain was still on the floor, and the building was unstable. He had to protect, even now. As the missiles streaked from Tony's suit, Deku's response was instantaneous. Black Whip erupted from his arms, not as brutal cudgels, but as a swarm of precise, grasping tendrils. They shot through the air, a net of living shadow that snatched every single missile, their warheads centimeters from his face, and cocooned them in thick, energy-dampening strands. He swung them around and deposited the now inert bundle gently on the floor. Inside his helmet, Tony Stark was, for the first time since arriving, genuinely stunned. He caught them? His mind reeled. The material strength of those tendrils is off the charts. And the reaction time. This wasn't just some kid with an energy gimmick. This was something else entirely. Okay, new plan, Tony muttered, and blasted forward, his boot jets flaring. He was going to get in close, physically restrain him. Deku saw him coming. He didn't have time to charge a full power counter. He met the charge, crossing his arms in a defensive block. The impact was like being hit by a freight train. He skidded back 10 feet, his boots carving grooves in the concrete, but he held. His arms screamed in protest, but they didn't break. The sheer, raw strength behind the block sent another jolt of surprise through Tony's systems. The suit's internal sensors registered the kinetic feedback as astronomical. You're strong, Tony grunted, pushing forward, his repulsors firing at point-blank range. Deku twisted, letting the blast scar the floor next to him. He used the momentum, his body a fluid extension of One for All. He shot a strand of Black Whip that wrapped around Iron Man's ankle, and he pulled. An opponent who could fly wasn't expecting to be grounded. Tony stumbled, his flight stabilizers fighting for a moment before he regained his balance. It was the opening Deku needed, not to attack, but to close the distance and talk. He zipped forward, appearing right in front of the armored figure. Stop! I am not your enemy, Tony reacted on pure instinct, throwing a punch powered by his suit's mechanical strength. Deku caught the metal fist. The world seemed to fall silent for a second. The sound of rain, the hum of distant sirens, all faded away. There was only the sight of Deku's smaller, gloved hand wrapped around the fist of the Mark 85, holding it completely still. The metal of Tony's gauntlet groaned under the pressure. Warning, structural integrity at 94%. External pressure exceeds design tolerances. Tony Stark, the man who had gone toe-to-toe with the Hulk and held an Infinity Stone, was being held in place by a teenager. What are you? Tony asked, his snark finally giving way to raw disbelief. Before Deku could answer, a groan came from the floor. Glitch, the villain, was starting to stir. At the same moment, the cracked crystal on the defunct dimensional device began to flicker with a faint, residual purple light. Both heroes, for that's what they both were, turned their heads in perfect unison. Their brief, violent conflict was forgotten, replaced by the immediate, shared instinct to contain the real threat. "It's not over," Deku said, his voice low and urgent. "The core is still holding a charge. It's trying to reinitiate the cascade failure," Tony said, his HUD already analyzing the flickering light. "We need to discharge it. Safely." He looked at Deku, at the hand still holding his fist. A silent truce passed between them. Deku let go. "Your lightning," Tony said, his voice all business now. "Can you channel it?" "Not a punch. A sustained, focused electrical current." Deku nodded. "I think so. I can use Black Whip as a conduit." "Good. Wrap the core. When I give the signal, flood it. I'll use my unibeam to polarize the energy release, forcing it to vent vertically. It'll be a big light show, but it should be contained." It was a complex plan that required perfect trust and timing, devised in seconds. Deku didn't hesitate. He sent 2 thick strands of Black Whip snaking around the cracked crystal, the black tendrils humming as they made contact with the volatile energy. "Ready?" Deku grunted, the feedback making his teeth ache. The circle on Tony's chest glowed with intense, building light. "On my mark. 3, 2. Now!" Deku unleashed a torrent of green lightning, not as a chaotic explosion, but as a controlled river of power flowing through the Black Whip conduits. Simultaneously, a thick, searing beam of pure white energy erupted from Iron Man's chest, striking the crystal at the exact same moment. For a heartbeat, the 2 energies, green and white, fought for dominance. Then they merged, enveloping the device in a blinding sphere of light. With a deafening crack, a column of harmless, incandescent energy shot upwards, punching a neat hole through the warehouse roof and dissipating into the rain-soaked clouds above. Then silence. The crystal crumbled to dust. The machine was dead. The threat was over. The sirens were closer now. Red and blue lights flashed against the wet streets. Deku stood panting, the remnants of OFA's lightning fading from his skin. The figure in the iron suit stood perfectly still, its head tilted as if listening. Then, with a series of soft clicks and whirs, the nanites of the helmet flowed away, retracting down into the collar of the suit. The face revealed was not what Deku expected. He was older, with tired, intelligent eyes that held a galaxy of weariness. His dark hair was messed up, and his goatee was impeccably trimmed, a strange point of order in the surrounding chaos. He looked exhausted, confused, and profoundly out of place. His eyes scanned Deku, taking in the scars, the patched costume, the raw power that still seemed to cling to him like an aura. Tony's internal sensors were giving him a final, baffling summary of the kid's energy signatures. It wasn't one power. It was like a constellation of them, all bundled into one teenage boy. Tony Stark took a deep breath, the foreign air tasting of rain, ozone, and concrete. He looked from the hole in the roof to the unconscious villain, to the impossible boy standing before him. "Okay, kid," Tony said, his voice no longer a metallic boom but a rough, human rasp. He gestured vaguely at Deku's entire being. "Green lightning, black tentacles, super strength. You've got a lot going on." He took a step forward, his metal boots clanking on the floor. His gaze was intense, searching, the mind of a genius grappling with a problem that broke every known law of his universe. "Start talking. What planet am I on?" The wail of approaching sirens was a familiar, almost comforting sound to Izuku Midoriya. It was the closing music to the violent overture of a hero's work. But tonight, it felt alien, intrusive. He stood in the wreckage of the Cybercore Dynamics building, the air thick with the smell of ozone and wet concrete, and looked at the man who called himself Tony Stark. The man who had fallen out of a tear in reality. "Planet?" Deku repeated, the single word feeling absurd on his tongue. "You're on Earth. This is Muzidafu, Japan." Tony Stark's eyebrow arched, a sliver of his trademark skepticism cutting through his exhaustion. "Right. Japan. Explains the architecture, not the green-haired kid who can bench press my suit. Look, we've got company coming, and I'd rather not explain extra-dimensional castaway to guys with flashing lights and flimsy-looking body armor." He was right. In moments, the warehouse would be swarming with police and local pro-heroes. How could Deku possibly explain this? He imagined trying to file a report. Subject: unidentified armored individual. Quirk: appears to be money. Follow me, Deku said, his voice firm with a sudden decision. Don't talk to anyone. Just stay with me. I know who to call. Tony gave him a long, appraising look. His internal scanners, though struggling with the alien environment, confirmed the kid had no weapon on him other than his own biology. He saw the earnestness in those wide, green eyes, the same desperate sincerity he'd seen in another kid, long ago, in a queen's apartment. Against his better judgment, against every protocol of self-preservation he'd ever written, he nodded. You're the boss, Green Bean. As the first police cars skidded to a halt outside, Deku made the call. Not to All Might. Tashinori was too fragile for this level of weirdness. He called the one person equipped for the truly, fundamentally impossible, his homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. 10 minutes later, Aizawa arrived, looking more like a wraith than a pro-hero. He moved with a weary silence, his capture weapon draped around his neck like a shroud, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. He took in the scene, the hole in the roof, the unconscious villain being loaded onto a stretcher, and the gleaming red and gold suit of armor standing next to his most problematic student. Aizawa's gaze lingered on Tony, his expression as flat and unreadable as stone. Midoriya, Aizawa's voice was a low rasp. You have 60 seconds to explain why I shouldn't treat this man as a hostile entity, and wrap him up until he tells me his life story. He's not a villain, Sensei, Deku said quickly. He helped me stop the device. He's not from here. I don't mean the city. I mean at all. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. He looked at Tony, whose suit was now retracting, nanites flowing back into the central chest unit, leaving him standing in a slightly singed but ridiculously expensive-looking tracksuit. I need to bring him to UA, Deku pressed. This is a situation for Principal Niza. Aizawa was silent for a long, tense moment, his gaze boring into Tony. Inside his head, Tony's own mental threat assessment was running. Subject male, early 30s. Appears exhausted but highly alert. Posture suggests advanced CQC training. The scarf, some sort of tensile alloy? Possible capture weapon. Quirk, nullification, based on the way his eyes just flared and the kid's energy signature momentarily dipped. A walking EMP. Dangerous. Do not engage. Finally, Aizawa gave a tired sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the whole world. Fine. But he doesn't take a single step without my eyes on him, and if he so much as sneezes wrong, I'm putting him in a knot. Get in the car. The ride to UA was thick with a tense, unspoken silence. The drive culminated not in the usual student entrance, but in a secure underground garage. From there, they were escorted through stark, metallic corridors to the highest floor of the main tower, to the polished mahogany door of Principal Niza's office. The room within was a jarring contrast of cozy and clinical. A panoramic window offered a breathtaking, rain-swept view of the entire campus. On one side, a comfortable sofa and a low table set with a steaming tea service. On the other, a bank of monitors displaying security feeds and complex data streams. And behind a large desk, perched in a chair far too big for him, was Principal Niza. The creature, a white-furred animal that could be a mouse, a bear, or a dog, depending on the angle, smiled, a gesture that never quite reached his sharp, intelligent eyes. Midoriya, Aizawa, and our unexpected guest. Welcome. Please have a seat. Earl Grey, Tony Stark, who had faced down gods and monsters, found himself momentarily speechless. He was being offered tea by what looked like the CEO of a stuffed animal company. I'll stand, Tony said, his gaze sweeping the room, noting the cameras, the reinforced door, the subtle glint of what might be automated turrets in the ceiling corners. Let's skip the pleasantries. Your student says you're the guy in charge? So, let's get to it. Where am I, and how do I get back? Niza's smile widened a fraction. Blunt. I appreciate that. To answer your first question, as Midoriya has likely told you, you are at UA High School, the premier hero academy in Japan. As for your second question, that may be significantly more complicated. Niza gestured to Deku. Izuku, if you would be so kind as to provide Mr. Stark with the context. Taking a deep breath, Deku began. He started with the basics, the story every child in this world knew by heart. He spoke of the first glowing baby in Qingqing City, the dawn of a new era of humanity where the impossible became commonplace. He explained quirks, the genetic mutations that granted powers ranging from the mundane to the godlike. He explained how society buckled and then reformed around this new reality, giving rise to villains who used their powers for selfish gain, and the heroes who rose to stop them. He talked about All Might, the symbol of peace, a pillar of strength so immense that his very presence had suppressed crime for a decade. He explained the hero rankings, the licensing system, the Hero Public Safety Commission, the bureaucratic machine that ran their world. Then, his voice grew heavier. He spoke of the war. Of All for One, a century-old mastermind who could steal and grant quirks. Of Tamura Shigaraki, his successor, a force of pure decay and rage. He spoke of the staggering losses, the collapse of the HPSC's authority, and the wave of fear and vigilantism that followed. He spoke of a society that had put all its faith in one man, and when that man fell, the entire structure had begun to crumble. We won, Deku finished, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on a point on the floor. But the system is broken. The trust is gone. We're just picking up the pieces. Throughout the explanation, Tony was silent, his arms crossed. His face was a mask of detached analysis, but his eyes were sharp, processing every word. He glanced at Aizawa, who was leaning against the wall, his expression grim. He looked at the creature Nizu, whose whiskers twitched with every detail. And he looked at Deku, a kid who spoke of global catastrophe with the first-hand pain of a battlefield veteran. Nizu steepled his paws. And now, Mr. Stark, perhaps you could enlighten us. A world without quirks, I must confess, is a fascinating theoretical construct. What sort of heroes does a world like that produce? Tony pushed off the wall he was leaning against. My world isn't theoretical, Ratatouille. It's just different. We don't have built-in superpowers. So we build our own. He started with the easy stuff. He explained the Avengers, a response team assembled to deal with threats a normal army couldn't handle. A super soldier from the 40s, a scientist with a serious anger management problem, a couple of master assassins. He kept it vague, corporate speak for a global defense initiative. Aizawa snorted. So, a team of government-sanctioned vigilantes. Ex-government, mostly, Tony corrected smoothly. Bureaucracy and saving the world don't mix. Trust me. He moved on to the bigger picture, painting a broad strokes image of his reality. He mentioned aliens, Norse gods who were actually just highly advanced extraterrestrials, and the constant, looming threat of cosmic forces far beyond human understanding. Then, his tone shifted, losing its flippant edge. He spoke of a being named Thanos. A zealot who believed the only way to save the universe was to wipe out half of all life within it. He described the snap, the moment when, with a gesture, half of all life turned to dust. We lost, Tony said, his voice quiet and raw. The bravado was gone, replaced by the hollow echo of trauma. For 5 years we lived with it. The failure. The empty spaces where people used to be. Deku looked up, his own grief-filled eyes meeting Tony's. In that moment, the chasm between their worlds vanished. Deku saw past the armor and the arrogance to the man beneath, a man haunted by ghosts, a man who carried the weight of a universe on his shoulders. He knew that weight. He felt it every time he activated One for All. But you won, Deku said, a statement, not a question. You brought them back. Tony's expression tightened. He looked away, towards the rain-streaked window. Victory came at a price. It always does. He didn't mention the specifics. A time machine, a final stand, the feel of 6 incandescent stones burning through his veins. He didn't have to. Deku understood the language of sacrifice. A long silence settled over the room. It was Nizu who finally broke it. It seems, Mr. Stark, that despite the fundamental differences in our biology, our worlds share a common, unfortunate theme. A propensity for crisis that pushes individuals to bear impossible burdens. He hopped down from his chair. Perhaps a change of scenery is in order. Izuku, why don't you show our guest the campus? Specifically, the support course workshop. I believe Mr. Stark might find it stimulating. The halls of UA were quieter than Tony expected. The few students they passed hurried along with their heads down, the boisterous energy he would have associated with a high school replaced by a somber anxiety. He saw it in their eyes. These weren't kids. They were soldiers in a ceasefire. So this is Hero High School, Tony remarked as they walked. Gotta say, my high school experience was mostly trying to hack the DoD and avoiding my father. Yours seems a bit more intense. It wasn't always like this, Deku said softly, gesturing to a section of wall that was clearly a recent, hasty repair. Before the war, it was different. Brighter. They arrived at a set of massive, industrial-grade blast doors, from behind which came a cacophony of bangs, whirs, and the occasional panic yell. A plaque on the wall read, Support Course Workshop Studio 1. What's the support course? Tony asked. They're the students who build equipment for heroes, Deku explained. Support gear, costumes, new tech. He pushed the door open, and Tony was hit by a wall of sensory overload. The workshop was a cathedral of controlled chaos. It smelled of hot metal, ozone, and burned sugar. Workbenches were buried under blueprints, half-assembled gadgets, and discarded energy drink cans. In one corner, a student was testing a pair of boots that suddenly launched him into the ceiling, where he hung from a newly formed crater. In another, a device sputtered and let out a cloud of pink smoke that smelled suspiciously of strawberries. It was glorious, and then an explosion. A small, contained boom erupted from the center of the room, followed by a plume of black smoke and a shower of sparks. As the smoke cleared, a figure emerged, pushing a pair of soot-covered goggles up onto a mess of pink, dreadlocked hair. Baby number 37B is a bust. A girl's voice shrieked with manic glee. The plasma conduit overloaded the regulators again. But the data is magnificent. She spotted Deku and her face, smudged with grease, lit up. Deku! Perfect timing. I need you to test my new recoil-dampening gauntlets. They only have a 40% chance of dislocating your shoulder this time. This was Mei Hatsum. Her wild, telescopic eyes then landed on Tony. They zoomed in, the crosshairs in her pupils narrowing as she took in his tracksuit, the sleek device on his chest, and the faint, residual energy signature of the nanites. Her jaw dropped. Whoa, she breathed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she stalked towards him. She circled him like a shark, her eyes scanning every inch of him. You're not from around here. Your clothes have a weird energy signature, and that chest piece. Is that a self-contained power source? An arc reactor? The theoretical framework is sound, but the miniaturization has been impossible to stabilize. How did you solve the palladium core poisoning issue? Or did you leapfrog to a new element? Is it vibranium synthesized? Is that nanotech? Can I touch it? Tony Stark stared at the girl, a slow, genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time since he'd arrived in this insane world. The weariness in his eyes was replaced by a familiar, brilliant gleam. He had found his people. It's a proprietary palladium core replacement using a newly synthesized, non-toxic element, Tony said, his voice alive with an energy that hadn't been there before. And no, you can't touch it. But you, he pointed a finger at her, I like your style. What's this about plasma conduits? May's shriek of joy was deafening. She dragged Tony over to her workbench, completely ignoring Deku, and began excitedly explaining the schematics for a directional plasma cannon. Tony listened, nodding, and then, without asking, he picked up a nearby Stark pad, a tablet so advanced it made the UE tech look like an abacus, and started sketching. His fingers flew across the holographic screen. Your magnetic containment field is too broad. You're losing energy density. You need to triangulate the emitters, create a vortex stabilization loop here, and reroute the secondary power flow through a regenerative capacitor. Like this. He turned the screen to her. It was her design, but perfect. Elegant. A dozen problems she'd been wrestling with for months, solved in 30 seconds. May's eyes, magnified by her goggles, went impossibly wide. She looked at the schematic, then at Tony, then back at the schematic. She let out a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, she whispered, reverence in her voice. It's my new favorite baby. Watching them, Deku felt a strange pang. It wasn't jealousy. It was hope. He was watching two geniuses from different universes speak the same language. The language of creation. An hour later, Deku managed to pull Tony away from his newfound protégé, promising he could come back later. Their tour continued to one of the outdoor training facilities, Ground Beta, a sprawling cityscape of concrete buildings. From a reinforced observation deck, they watched an ongoing training exercise. Katsuki Bakugo, Eijiro Kirishima, and Denki Kaminari were tasked with subduing a villain played by the hero Ectoplasm. The strategy was simple. Bakugo was the spearhead, propelling himself through the streets with explosions, screaming challenges. "Come out and face me, you damn extra! It's a stealth mission, Bakugo!" Kirishima yelled, running after him, his body hardened into a defensive shield. "Shut up, shitty hair! A real villain wouldn't hide!" Bakugo retorted, before launching a massive howitzer impact at a building where he thought he heard a noise. The resulting explosion sent a shower of concrete debris raining down. From a rooftop, Kaminari unleashed his indiscriminate shock, sending 1,000,000 volts of electricity arcing through the area. It missed the ectoplasm clone but shorted out the streetlights and nearly fried Kirishima, who yelped as his hardened skin conducted the stray voltage. From his vantage point, Tony watched, his face impassive. His HUD, however, was a flurry of activity, analyzing trajectories, power outputs, and tactical inefficiencies. Deku winced. They're still working on their teamwork. Tony didn't respond for a long time. He just watched as Bakugo, frustrated, carpet-bombed an entire city block to flush out a single target. Finally, he turned off his internal display and looked at Deku. His expression was no longer amused or curious. It was grimly serious. "You're right," Tony said, his voice flat. "The system is broken. But it's worse than you think." He gestured to the chaos below. "You have gods walking among you. That kid ash blonde, the one with the temper problem? My suit estimates the peak energy output of a single one of his blasts is comparable to a GBU 43/B Moab. And he's using it to play hide and seek. The electric kid just discharged enough wattage to power a small city for an hour, with all the precision of a fire hose. The redhead is a walking diamond, and you're using him as a glorified door-knocker." His gaze hardened, and he turned to face Deku fully. The words that came next were not an observation. They were an indictment. "You're operating like a disorganized neighborhood watch. Your support gear," he jabbed a thumb back in the direction of May's workshop, "is creative but dangerously unstable and 30 years out of date. You have no centralized intel. You're just sending out walking WMDs based on who's closest. You have no real-time strategic analysis, no RD pipeline that isn't a girl in a garage hoping her inventions don't kill someone. And I'm willing to bet my left kidney you have no mandatory, long-term mental health support for these kids who are seeing more combat than most career soldiers." Every word was a hammer blow, striking the very core of Deku's deepest fears and failures. Sir Nitai's death, a failure of intel. The war, a cascade of communication breakdowns. His own solitary, trauma-fueled rampage, a cry for help in a system that had no framework to answer it. "You're not a hero's society," Tony finished, his voice dropping, but losing none of its intensity. "You're a collection of individual, traumatized celebrities waiting for the next disaster, armed with thoughts and prayers. And you're teaching children to follow you down the exact same path." The truth of it was a physical weight, pressing down on Deku, stealing the air from his lungs. For months he had felt this, a deep, systemic wrongness he couldn't articulate. He had tried to fix it the only way he knew how, by taking all the burdens, all the punches, onto himself. He had tried to become a stronger symbol, but Tony had just shown him that the symbol itself was a flawed concept. They didn't need a stronger shield. They needed a better plan. Deku looked from the training grounds, a diorama of their flawed present, to the man standing beside him. A man who had built world-saving technology in a cave, with a box of scraps. A man who saw the cracks in their world with terrifying, brilliant clarity. A man who, for all his arrogance, understood the price of failure. A new feeling sparked in Deku's chest, cutting through the fog of his despair. It wasn't the reckless, self-sacrificial drive of before. It was a sharp, clear, desperate hope. He turned to Tony, his green eyes burning with a new kind of fire. Then help me, Deku said, his voice quiet but ringing with absolute conviction. Help me build something better. Tony Stark looked at the kid. He saw the scars, the trauma, and the unbreakable will beneath it all. He saw a kindred spirit, a soul who refused to let the world stay broken. The corner of his mouth twitched. The weariness that had clung to him like a shroud was well and truly gone, burned away by the heat of a new, impossible project. A slow, confident, borderline arrogant smirk spread across his face. Kid, he said, clapping a hand on Deku's shoulder. You came to the right guy. He looked out at the city, his mind already alight with schematics and possibilities. Let's draft a proposal. I'm thinking. The Stark Midoriya Protocols. Has a nice ring to it. Very official. The air in UA's largest strategic briefing room was electric. It was a space designed for wartime councils and crisis management, dominated by a massive, circular table and surrounded by a 360-degree wall of holographic projectors. For the past 12 hours, it had been transformed into the crucible of a new world, and at its heart were two radically different architects, one of spirit, one of steel. Tony Stark, fueled by what seemed to be an endless supply of coffee and his own manic genius, paced the room like a caged panther. He gestured, and holographic schematics bloomed in the air, complex wireframes of buildings and data networks swirling around him. Izuku Midoriya, a stark contrast in his simple UA tracksuit, sat at the table, a dozen notebooks open before him, his pen scratching furiously as he tried to keep up, interjecting with questions and concerns that were invariably grounded in the human cost of heroism. Watching from the periphery were the key figures of UA's faculty. Principal Niza sat observing, his whiskers twitching with unconcealed delight, a fresh pot of tea at his elbow. Aizawa leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his usual tired cynicism warring with a flicker of something dangerously close to hope. All Might, in his skeletal form, was there too, a silent, gaunt spectator watching his successor attempt to build the world he never could. Okay, foundation first, Tony declared, clapping his hands together. The holograms vanished, replaced by a single, glowing title, the Stark Midoriya Initiative. Catchy, right? Sounds like a law firm for superheroes. People trust law firms. Or at least, they're afraid of them. Same difference. He swiped his hand, and 4 pillars of light shot up from the floor. These are the cornerstones. The load-bearing walls of our new house. Pillar 1, Centralized Strategic Command. CSC. A complex web of data flow charts and network maps appeared. Right now, your hero deployment is a joke. It's a dispatch operator looking at a map and sending whoever's closest. It's reactive. It's dumb. The CSC changes that. We build a central hub, a nerve center. We integrate everything: satellite imagery, communications, police scanners, public transport data, social media sentiment analysis, hell, even weather patterns. We feed it all into a predictive analysis 6? Deku asked, looking up from his notes. Virtual intelligence. Not a true AI like my FRIDY. No risk of an Ultron situation. Note to self, brief you on that particular screw-up later. Think of it as a superanalyst. It sifts through the noise, identifies patterns, and flags potential crises before they happen. A villain starts buying up weird chemicals? The 6 flags it. A sudden power drain in a specific district? The 6 cross-references it with known villain quirks. It gives us a head start. Niza's eyes gleamed. A magnificent application of my own quirk, high spec, on a global scale. You're proposing a system that can outthink your opponents before the first punch is thrown. Exactly, Fozzie Bear, Tony said with a grin. And in a crisis, it's our eye in the sky. Real-time coordination. It tells heroes the best point of entry, identifies structural weaknesses in a collapsing building, maps civilian locations for evacuation. No more heroes running in blind. Every move is informed by data. Deku's brow furrowed. But what about the human element? An algorithm can't predict a villain's desperation. It can't understand why a hero might disobey in order to save one more person. All Might taught me that sometimes, you have to go beyond, plus ultra. A machine can't do that. Tony stopped pacing and looked at him, his expression softening slightly. You're right. It can't. That's why the 6 only advises. The final call, the boots on the ground decision, always belongs to the human commander. The CSC isn't about replacing hero intuition. It's about giving that intuition the best possible information to work with. It's a smart weapon, but the hero is the one who aims it. Deku nodded slowly, a look of understanding dawning on his face. This wasn't about removing the heart of heroism. It was about protecting it. Pillar 2. Tony continued, swiping to the next column of light. Advanced Support Division. ASD, a hologram of May Hatsum's grinning, grease-smudged face appeared, much to her delight as she watched from a live feed in her workshop. This is where your girl, Pinky, gets to play with a budget that would make most countries weep. We build her a state-of-the-art R&D lab. I'm talking clean rooms, a particle accelerator, nanotech fabricators, the works. The ASD will have one job: build better toys. He pulled up images of standard-issue hero gear. This stuff is archaic. It's mass-produced junk. We do better. Custom-tailored gear for every single registered hero in the initiative. We analyze their quirk, their fighting style, their weaknesses, and we build a suit and a loadout that maximizes their strengths and minimizes their risks. Deku's eyes lit up. This was his territory. We could create pressure-regulating suits for heroes with strength enhancement quirks to prevent self-injury, thermoregulation gear for fire and ice users to stop them from overheating or getting frostbite. And what about heroes with non-combat quirks? Someone who can talk to squirrels could be an invaluable scout with the right communications tech. A hero whose quirk is just making things slippery could be equipped with projectors to create non-lethal containment zones. Now you're getting it, Tony said, pointing at him. It's about force multiplication. We make every hero, no matter how weak their quirk seems, an essential asset. We focus on non-lethal takedowns, sticky foam grenades, sonic dampeners, EMP pulses, deployable capture nets. The goal is to end fights quickly, safely, and with minimal property damage, less blowing up city blocks. He added, glancing pointedly at the memory of Bakugo's training exercise, and more wrapping things up with a neat little bow. Pillar 3. Tony's voice grew more serious. Hero wellness and advancement. Wah! The hologram shifted to a serene image of a doctor's office and a high-tech gymnasium. This is your department, kid. I saw it in your eyes. You've been through the meat grinder. Deku's hands clenched into fists on the table. Heroes are breaking, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Mentally and physically. We fight villains, we see terrible things, we get injured, and the system just expects us to patch ourselves up and get back out there. We mourn our dead and then get judged for not smiling enough at the next press conference. It's not sustainable. Tony nodded, his own ghost flickering behind his eyes. Broken soldiers don't win wars. The HWA makes mental and physical health a priority. Not a suggestion, a requirement. Every hero in the initiative undergoes mandatory weekly counseling sessions. Period. No stigma, no exceptions. We'll have the best therapists, psychiatrists, and trauma specialists on staff 24/7. Aizawa, who had been silent until now, spoke up, his voice a low growl of approval. Good. They're children, Stark. We train them to fight monsters, but we forget they're still kids who have nightmares. Exactly, Sleepy Hollow. Tony agreed. And it's not just talk therapy. It's physical therapy. It's advanced combat training that focuses on teamwork and de-escalation, not just bigger punches. We teach them how to rely on each other, how to fight as a unit. We build a community, a support system, so no hero ever has to feel like they're carrying the world alone. He looked directly at Deku. Sound familiar? Deku felt a lump form in his throat. It was everything he had needed during his darkest days. A hand to hold. An ear to listen. The simple, profound reassurance that he wasn't alone. He could only nod, unable to speak. Finally, Tony said, moving to the last pillar. Public Trust Initiative. PTI. The hologram showed a slick, modern news studio. The Hero Public Safety Commission. From what I've gathered, they were masters of propaganda. They sold you a myth, a flawless symbol of peace, and when the man behind the myth faltered, the whole thing collapsed because it was built on a lie. We don't make that mistake. We need to be honest, Deku supplied, finding his voice. The public deserves the truth. They're scared because they don't know what's happening. They see the destruction, but they don't see the fight. They don't see the victories, no matter how small. Control the narrative, Tony stated. But with honesty. The PTI is our media wing. We provide our own coverage of incidents. Live drone footage, real-time updates from the CSC, and post-action reports. We show our work. If we make a mistake, we own it. We explain what went wrong and how we're going to fix it. We put a human face on heroism, scars and all. Transparency builds trust far more effectively than any polished poster of a smiling hero. The 4 pillars stood glowing in the center of the room, a blueprint for a revolution. It was ambitious. It was terrifying. It was brilliant. All Might, who had been listening with a heavy heart, finally spoke. This is a magnificent vision, young Stark. But it requires resources on a scale I cannot imagine. Land, technology, personnel. The HPSC controlled the government's coffers. We have only the UA budget. Tony Stark smirked, the expression of a man who had just been asked if he could afford a cup of coffee. He tapped the reactor on his chest. Friday-chan, you still have that quantum entangled link to the home server? Affirmative, boss. It's weak and requires a significant power draw, but the connection is stable. Good girl. Access my private accounts. All of them. Find a way to liquidate, let's say $10 billion. Convert it to yen. Now here's the fun part. You'll need to bypass the international banking system of this dimension. I'd recommend a series of microtransactions funneled through shell corporations you'll need to create in their global network. Start with something innocuous. A fishery in Hokkaido. Then bounce it through a textile manufacturer in India, a shell bank in the Cayman Islands. Wait, do they have a Cayman Islands? Find the equivalent. Use the resulting capital to purchase a controlling interest in a major Japanese financial institution. Then, authorize a direct, legal transfer to a new account under the name the Stark Midoriya Initiative. The room was utterly silent. Aizawa's jaw was slack. All Might looked like he was about to have a heart attack for the second time in his life. Nizu, however, was vibrating with sheer, unadulterated joy. You're planning to destabilize the global economy as a form of wire transfer? He squeaked, his eyes wide with manic glee. It's the most beautiful, chaotic, and elegant solution I have ever heard. Aizawa, get this man more tea. Transfer complete, boss. A Friday's voice chirped from Tony's watch a mere 90 seconds later. A few financial watchdogs have been automatically triggered, but I've flagged them as algorithmic errors. They'll be chasing their tails for months. $10 billion, which converts to approximately 1.4 trillion yen, is now available. Tony clapped his hands together, rubbing them with satisfaction. Excellent. Now for a headquarters. Friday-chan, find me the tallest, most ostentatiously bankrupt corporate skyscraper in the greater Tokyo area. I want something with good lines and a helipad. A moment later, a holographic image of a sleek, dark glass tower appeared. The former headquarters of the Detonarat Company, liquidated following the arrest of its CEO, Rikiya Yatsubashi, for ties to the Paranormal Liberation Front. It's been sitting empty for months. Structurally sound, prime location. Perfect, Tony declared. Buy it. And schedule the contractors. We've got some renovations to do. He turned to the stunned occupants of the room. We have a plan. We have the money. We have a location. Now, kid. He looked at Deku. We need a team. Deku started with the people he trusted most, the ones who had stood by him when he was at his lowest. He found Achiko Uraraka in one of the training gyms, practicing her hand-to-hand combat against the robot. Her expression was fierce, determined, a far cry from the bubbly girl who had first entered UA. He and Tony laid out the plan for her. Tony focused on the tech, pulling up holograms of advanced rescue equipment. Imagine this, Uravity, Tony said, showing her a design for lightweight, deployable gravity nets. You touch the nets, make them zero gravity. They can be deployed across an entire street, catching falling debris or providing a safe landing for people jumping from a building. We can also build you focused gravity projectors. Instead of just making things float, you can create controlled pockets of high gravity to pin down villains without hurting them. Achiko's eyes, wide and full of hope, were fixed on the designs. It wasn't the power that excited her, it was the potential. I could save more people, she whispered. I could keep them safe, even from a distance. She looked at Deku, a brilliant smile breaking through her serious facade. I'm in. 100%. Next was Tenya Ida. They found him in the library, organizing his class notes with meticulous precision. He listened to their proposal with a stern, analytical expression, his hands steepled in front of him. He didn't care about the flashy tech or the grand vision. He cared about the logic. It was the CSC, the Centralized Strategic Command, that won him over. A system dedicated to efficient resource allocation, proactive threat assessment, and the minimization of collateral damage through superior logistics? Ida said, pushing his glasses up his nose. The speed with which he spoke increased with his excitement. This is the epitome of responsible heroism. A framework to prevent tragedies like the one that befell my brother, Tensei. Relying on a single symbol is inefficient, and creates a dangerous single point of failure. A structured, data-driven team approach is the only logical path forward. He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the floor. He bowed a perfect 90 degrees. As the class representative of 1A, and as a hero in training, I would be honored to lend my full support to the Stark Midoriya initiative. Shoto Todoroki was on a balcony, looking out at the rain, a trail of frost spreading idly from his right hand. He listened to Deku's explanation quietly, his heterochromatic eyes unreadable. He didn't need to see the holograms or hear about the funding. He just needed to look at his friend. My father, Shoto said, his voice a low murmur, believes that power is the only thing that matters. The rankings, the strength, the glory. That's the system he thrives in. The system that created him. He turned his gaze from the horizon to Deku. You're trying to build something different. Something that isn't about being number one. It's about being better. For everyone. He offered a small, rare smile. You saved me from my own path, Izuku. Of course I'll follow you on yours. The final recruitment was the most volatile. They didn't have to find Katsuki Bakugo. He found them. The door to the briefing room was thrown open with a resounding bang, making the frame shudder. Bakugo stood there, his hands shoved in his pockets, his face a thunderous scowl. I heard you've been whispering in corners with this weird old guy, Deku. He snarled, jabbing a thumb at Tony. Planning to what? Start your own hero agency for wannabes and washouts. He stalked into the room, his eyes blazing. You think you can just build a new society because the old one kicked your ass? You always have to take stupid shortcuts. It's not a shortcut, Kakin, Deku said, standing his ground. It's a better way. A better way is me getting stronger and blowing villains to Kingdom Come. Bakugo shot back. I don't need any charity from some billionaire with a glowing coaster on his chest. Tony, who had been watching with an amused smirk, stepped forward. Is that so, Porcupine? Because my scans of your last training session suggest your blowing villains to Kingdom Come technique has an efficiency rating of about 12%. Most of your energy is wasted on recoil, light, and sound, not to mention the strain on your forearms from the repetitive stress of containing nitroglycerin-fueled blasts. At your current rate, you'll have debilitating arthritis by the time you're 30. Bakugo was momentarily stunned into silence, his rage short-circuiting in the face of blunt, technical criticism. What did you say to me, you walking tin can? Tony ignored him and waved his hand. A detailed, 3D schematic of Bakugo's gauntlets appeared in the air. Your gear is primitive. It's basically a giant grenade with a pin. It stores your sweat, you pull the trigger, boom. Dumb. He then overlaid a new design, a sleeker, more complex version. My design, on the other hand, is not. A nan-carbon composite frame to reduce weight, a cryogenic cooling system that cycles through the bracers to instantly regulate the heat from your explosions, allowing for a faster rate of fire without risk of burns, a gyroscopic stabilizer that absorbs and redistributes 90% of the recoil, channeling it into a kinetic charger that powers the whole system. You could fire a dozen howitzer impacts in a row and feel less kickback than a Nerf gun. Bakugo's eyes were glued to the hologram. His angry scowl had been replaced by an expression of intense, greedy focus. He saw the integrated targeting system, the adjustable blast radius, the potential. This gear requires a user with an incredibly high and volatile power output to even function properly, Tony said casually, feigning disinterest. Most heroes would just break their arms. We were probably going to have to scrap the design since we couldn't find anyone with a strong enough quirk to even test the prototype. That was the hook. The perfect bait. It wasn't an offer of help, it was a challenge. A declaration that Bakugo was, perhaps, the only one strong enough. Bakugo's teeth were gritted. His pride, his ambition, and his raw desire to be the best were at war with his hatred of admitting he needed anything, especially anything connected to Deku. The war lasted all of 3 seconds. TCH, he grunted, turning his head away so no one could see the hungry look in his eyes. Fine. I'll use your stupid new toys. But don't get it twisted. He shot a fiery glare at Deku. This is just so I have better gear to finally crush you and become the #1 hero. That's all. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Deku sighed. Tony clapped him on the shoulder. That's a yes in Bakugo SA. I'll get May started on the prototypes. 1 week later, the newly christened Hero Initiative Tower held its first press conference. The grand ballroom on the ground floor was packed. Every major news network was present, their cameras a forest of glass eyes. Pro heroes, from top 10 veterans to nervous rookies, filled the seats. In the front row sat a delegation of stone-faced government officials, sent to observe this audacious, unsanctioned event. The air was thick with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and outright hostility. On the stage, under the bright, hot lights, stood Tony Stark and Izuku Midoriya. Tony stepped up to the podium first, exuding an effortless, world-conquering charisma. Good morning, Miyazutafu, he began, a relaxed smile on his face. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Tony Stark. I'm an engineer, an inventor, and a concerned citizen. I'm new in town, but it doesn't take a genius to see that you've all been through hell. You've lost heroes, you've lost homes, and most importantly, you've lost faith. The system you relied on, the institution of heroism, was put to the ultimate test, and it cracked under the pressure. A murmur went through the crowd. It was a truth everyone knew, but no one dared say so publicly. This isn't about blame, Tony continued, holding up a hand. This is about learning. It's about evolving. My entire life has been about building things to solve problems, and what I see here is a problem that can be solved. We have the brightest minds, the bravest hearts, and the most incredible powers ever conceived of. What we lack is the right framework, the right support, the right tools. He gestured to the large screen behind him, where the 4 pillars of the initiative were displayed. The Stark Midoriya Initiative is that framework. It's a promise of smarter strategy, better equipment, healthier heroes, and honest communication. It's not a replacement for the heroes you trust. It's an upgrade. An evolution. We're here to give your heroes the support they need to do their jobs more safely and effectively than ever before. He was slick, persuasive, and utterly confident. He sold them a vision of a safer, brighter future, and the skeptical crowd began to lean forward, to listen. He had sold them the logic. Now, it was time for the heart. Tony stepped back, and Deku moved forward. He looked so young under the harsh lights, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the sides of the podium. He took a deep breath, and his eyes scanned the crowd, meeting the gazes of his friends, his teachers, and the watching world. He didn't have a speech. He just had the truth. My name is Izuku Midoriya. My hero name is Deku, he began, his voice soft but clear. A long time ago, I was told that someone without a quirk couldn't be a hero. Later, I was given a great power and told I had to become the next symbol of peace. I tried. I really did. I thought that if I just got strong enough, if I took all the hits, I could save everyone. His voice cracked, and he swallowed hard. I was wrong. I couldn't. Heroes fell. People got hurt. And I pushed everyone away, thinking I was protecting them. That's the old way. The way that tells us one person has to bear the weight of the world. The way that asks heroes to be perfect, flawless symbols, and breaks them when they turn out to be human. He let go of the podium and stood straight, his eyes burning with conviction. That way is over. A symbol can be broken. But a community? A team, supporting each other, fighting together, being honest with each other and with all of you? That can't be broken. The initiative isn't about creating one new symbol. It's about building a society where hundreds of heroes, supported, healthy, and united, can stand together and say, "We are here." That is the promise we are making today. A stunned silence fell over the room. It was broken by a single person, then two, then a dozen, as people began to stand and applaud. The sound grew, a wave of hope washing over the cynical room. But not everyone was applauding. The camera for the national broadcast, as if guided by some dramatic instinct, panned away from the stage. It swept over the crowd and settled on the front row, on the government delegation. In the center sat the president of the Hero Public Safety Commission, a woman named Akane Kurowashi. She was immaculate in a severe dark suit, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face a mask of polite neutrality. She was not clapping. Her hands rested in her lap, perfectly still. Her jaw was set, a tiny muscle twitching just beneath her ear. Her eyes, cold and sharp as shards of obsidian, were fixed on the stage, on the two figures who had just thrown a gauntlet at the feet of her entire world order. In the placid stillness of her face, there was no surprise, no fear. There was only the chilling, absolute certainty of a predator whose territory had just been invaded. The gauntlet had been thrown down, and she was more than ready to pick it up. The applause from the press conference faded within hours, replaced by the deafening roar of political blowback. The Stark Midoriya initiative hadn't just made a ripple, it had dropped a continent into the placid, stagnant ocean of the Hero Public Safety Commission's authority. The HPSC, a behemoth of bureaucracy that had governed the hero world for generations, did not take kindly to being rendered obsolete on live television. Their response was swift and merciless. The morning after the conference, every hero with a valid license received a formal, encrypted communique from the HPSC. It was a masterpiece of veiled threats and bureaucratic intimidation, penned by President Akane Kurowashi herself. The language was cold, precise, and utterly chilling. The initiative was officially designated an unsanctioned support organization. Participation was strongly discouraged. It was framed as a reckless, private enterprise run by a traumatized teenager and a foreign national with a documented history of creating global-level threats. A pointed, heavily redacted reference to a file on the Ultron incident that Tony was grimly certain had been fabricated or at least creatively embellished. The memo went on to remind heroes that their licenses were granted and maintained by the HPSC. Their pensions, their insurance, their access to official channels, and their very legality were all contingent on their compliance with Commission directives. The implication was crystal clear: join the initiative, and your career is over. We will bury you in paperwork, revoke your license, and cast you out as a pariah. The effect was immediate. The initial wave of hopeful interest that had followed the press conference froze into a solid wall of fear. Heroes who had privately expressed excitement now refused to answer their phones. Support agencies that had offered partnerships suddenly had scheduling conflicts. The HPSC had drawn a line in the sand, and crossing it meant professional suicide. Inside the newly renovated upper floors of the Hero Initiative Tower, the mood was tense. The CSC, the Centralized Strategic Command, was still a skeleton, its server racks humming but its massive holographic displays showing more error messages than data as they struggled to get official access. Deku stood before a large screen displaying the HPSC's memo, his hands clenched at his sides. "They're trying to starve us out," he said, his voice tight with frustration. "They're threatening people's livelihoods. How can we build a better system if no one is brave enough to join?" Tony, sipping a cup of coffee from a mug that read "World's Best Extra-Dimensional Engineer," leaned back in his chair, seemingly unfazed. "Relax, kid. This was always part of the playbook. You don't dismantle an empire without the emperor throwing a fit. She's using the only weapon she has, fear and red tape. It's a classic move. Predictable. Boring even." "Boring? Tony, heroes are scared." Deku gestured wildly at the screen. "They have families, mortgages. They can't just throw away their careers on a promise." "No," Tony agreed, setting his mug down. They can't. So we have to prove that our promise is worth more than their threats. We knew the old guard wouldn't sign on. They're too comfortable, too invested in the status quo. We don't need them. Not yet. We need the ones who are already disillusioned, the ones who know the system is broken because they've been chewed up and spit out by it. We need the true believers. As if on cue, the elevator doors to the command center hissed open. Achiko Uraraka, Tenya Ida, and Shoto Todoroki stepped out, their expressions firm. They had each received the HPSC's warning. They had each deleted it without a second thought. We're here to report for duty, Uraraka said, her voice ringing with determination. What's our first assignment? Ida adjusted his glasses. The HPSC's tactics are both unethical and illogical. They are leveraging fear to maintain a demonstrably inefficient system. It is our moral obligation to defy them. Shoto simply nodded, a silent pillar of support. Where do we start? A genuine smile touched Deku's lips. He wasn't alone. The core of his team, his first recruits, were unshakable. Their loyalty, however, was about to be tested. The doors hissed open again, but this time, the arrival was far more explosive. DKU! Katsuki Bakugo's roar preceded him by a full second. He stormed into the CSC, waving a datapad with the HPSC memo displayed on it. Did you see this crap? They're threatening to take my license if I associate with you losers. We're aware, Kaken, Deku said wearily. Good. So what's the plan? Are we gonna go down there and blow up their stupid headquarters or what? I'm not letting some pencil-pushing hag tell me who I can and can't work with. Tony raised an eyebrow. As much as I appreciate the enthusiasm for proactive demolition, blowing up government buildings is generally frowned upon. Even for me. We have a better way of fighting back. Bakugo's fiery gaze shifted to Tony. Yeah? And what's that? More inspiring speeches? Prototypes, Tony said with a smirk. He gestured to another set of doors. Your new gear is ready for preliminary testing. The fire in Bakugo's eyes changed from rage to avarice. He stalked towards the indicated doors, muttering, This better be good, Tin Can. What they found in the adjoining room, a small, heavily reinforced training chamber, was more than good. It was a work of art. Resting on a pedestal were two gauntlets. They were sleeker and more angular than Bakugo's old gear, crafted from a matte black nanocarbon composite with sharp, crimson highlights. Wires and conduits pulsed with a soft, internal light. They looked less like storage tanks and more like the arms of a high-performance fighter jet. Mei Hatsum, her face alight with manic pride, was bouncing on the balls of her feet next to them. Aren't they the most beautiful babies you've ever seen? Mr. Stark's designs are divine. We had to invent 3 new alloys just for the cooling system. Bakugo approached the gauntlets with a reverence he usually reserved for All Might merchandise. He tentatively reached out and ran a finger along the smooth, cool metal. They integrate directly with a new undersuit, Tony explained, holding up a sleek, black bodysuit. Microsensors in the fabric monitor your sweat production, body temperature, and biometrics. The suit channels the nitroglycerin directly to the gauntlet's ignition chambers. It's all seamless. No more clunky grenades. You think it fires. Bakugo slipped on the suit and gauntlets. They were surprisingly light, molding to his arms as if they were a second skin. As he clenched his fists, the internal mechanisms whirred to life. A low hum of barely contained power. Test range is hot, Tony said from behind a thick plasteel barrier with Deku and the others. Give it a shot. Start small. An AP shot. Bakugo grinned, a feral, wolfish expression. He aimed at a 10-inch thick slab of reinforced concrete at the far end of the chamber. He focused, gathering his power not into the palm of his hand, but into the gauntlet itself. With a sharp crackle, a focused, pinpoint blast of explosive energy shot from the device. It hit the slab and didn't just crack it, it punched a perfectly clean, round hole straight through it. There was almost no recoil. He barely felt a tremor in his arm. Whoa! Kirishima breathed from behind the barrier. Bakugo's grin widened. He could feel the difference. The power was cleaner, more focused. The energy wasn't just exploding outwards, it was being shaped. Okay, he growled, a dangerous glint in his eye. Howitzer impact. Kaken, wait! Deku yelped. We're indoors, he'll be fine, Tony said calmly, watching the readouts on a tablet. The dampeners should hold. Bakugo crouched, spinning in the air as he always did, but this time, the energy felt different. It wasn't a wild, raging inferno. It was a star being born in the palm of his hand. He unleashed the blast. The explosion was immense, a blinding flash of white light, but the sound was strangely muted, a deep, resonant THOM instead of a deafening crack. The entire concrete target slab vaporized. The back wall of the chamber, specially reinforced, glowed red for a moment before the cooling systems kicked in, and Bakugo landed on his feet, not stumbling back from the recoil, but standing perfectly still. His arm wasn't even smoking. A thin layer of frost coated the outside of the gauntlet, the cryogenic cooling system having vented the excess heat. He stared at his hands, then at the obliterated wall. A slow, quiet, utterly terrifying laugh escaped his lips. The HPSC and their threats were forgotten. He had tasted the future, and it was intoxicating. I'm keeping these, he declared. He wasn't asking. The initiative may have had its first official members, but their resources were still limited. Their greatest asset was Tony, but even he had his blind spots in this new world. To truly fight the HPSC, they needed intelligence, and to get that, they needed someone who knew how to navigate the shadows of hero society. They needed Kigo Takami, the wing hero, Hawks. Getting a meeting was harder than expected. Hawks, as the HPSC's golden boy and current number 2 hero, was under intense scrutiny. He couldn't be seen consorting with the rogue initiative. The meeting, when it finally happened, was clandestine. A rooftop of an abandoned building in the dead of night, the city lights a distant, glittering carpet below. Hawks landed silently, his magnificent red wings folding neatly behind him. He looked even more tired than usual, the casual, laid-back persona stripped away to reveal the weary double agent beneath. You're making my life very difficult, Midoriya, he said, his voice low. He nodded at Tony. And you must be the man turning the world upside down, just trying to give it a more stable axis of rotation. Tony replied smoothly. The commission is panicking, Hawks said, getting straight to the point. He plucked a loose feather from his wing, examining it. Kawashi sees you as an existential threat. She's not just going to shut you down. She's going to make an example of you. She's digging into every hero who even liked your announcement on social media. She's auditing their finances, reviewing their old case files, looking for any leverage to keep them in line. We expected as much, Deku said. But there's something else happening, isn't there? We've been monitoring network traffic. There have been a series of strange attacks over the past few days. Small scale, but coordinated. Hawks's expression darkened. The Luddites. Tony's head snapped up. What did you call them? It's what the press is calling them, Hawks explained. A new villain group. They're exclusively targeting heroes loyal to the HPSC. Mid to low tier guys, mostly. They don't steal anything, they don't make demands. They just show up, humiliate the hero, and vanish. He tossed the feather, and it hovered in the air, projecting a holographic video file. It was grainy security footage of a back alley. A minor pro hero with a gigantification quirk was being swarmed by 3 figures in dark tactical gear and blank, white masks. The hero grew to 3 times his normal size, but before he could even throw a punch, one of the masked figures fired a small, cylindrical device at him. It attached to his leg with a hiss, and the hero instantly shrank back to his normal size, collapsing. The figures then spray-painted a stylized symbol of a broken circuit board on the wall, and melted back into the shadows. They use advanced anti-quirk technology, Hawks continued. EMP grenades, power dampeners, kinetic absorption fields. They never kill. They just neutralize and embarrass. Every attack makes the HPSC look weaker, more incompetent. Public confidence in the old system is plummeting. Tony's eyes were narrowed, focused on the video. He zoomed in on the device attached to the hero's leg. FRIDY, analyze that device. Energy signature, material composition, anything you can get. Analyzing, boss. The AI's voice replied from his watch. This feels too convenient, Deku mused. A new group of tech-based villains appears at the exact moment a tech-based hero initiative challenges the status quo, and their actions only serve to make the HPSC look bad and, by extension, make us look good. It's a false flag, Tony said, his voice suddenly grim. Or a third party trying to play us against each other. Either way, it's a setup. They're escalating the conflict, trying to force a confrontation. Hawks nodded. My thoughts exactly. The Commission is terrified of you. They're losing the PR war, and now they're losing the streets. A cornered animal is a dangerous animal. He looked from Deku to Tony, his golden eyes sharp and serious. He was supposed to be the HPSC's spy, but his loyalty had long since shifted. Be careful who you trust. Kurwashi has eyes everywhere. She's been in power a long time. The roots of her influence run deeper than you can imagine. With a final, meaningful look, he spread his wings and launched himself into the night sky, disappearing over the rooftops. Tony stood in silence for a moment, staring at the frozen image of the Luddites' device. Friday-chan, report. The device uses a localized pulse wave generator to disrupt the expression of the quirk factor at a cellular level, the AI stated. The technology is sophisticated, but the power source is crude, unstable. Okay, so they're smart but underfunded, Tony mused. What else? There is a faint, residual energy signature within the device's core capacitor. It's heavily shielded, but I was able to isolate a fragment of the decay pattern, and the decay pattern matches the elemental signature of the arc reactor technology from your Mark 6 armor, boss. The one you retired after the Palladium core issues. The air on the rooftop grew cold. This wasn't just a random group of tech-savvy villains. This was personal. Someone has my old notes, Tony whispered, his voice dangerously quiet. Someone is building weapons based on my designs. The answer to who would have to wait. The Luddites, emboldened by their successes, decided to escalate. Their next target was not a single hero, but a symbol of the HPSC's authority, the Hero Network. It was a private, high-speed rail line used exclusively for transporting heroes to crisis zones. The Luddites' plan was a masterpiece of chaos. They didn't just attack one train. They launched a coordinated, multi-pronged assault designed to cripple the entire city's transportation network during rush hour. Alarms blared through the CSC. The main holographic map of the city lit up with dozens of simultaneous alerts. They've hit the Shinjuku Junction, Ida called out, his fingers flying across a console. They've used an EMP to disable the central switching system. 3 trains are on a collision course. Another team has deployed a high-tensile net across the tracks near Shibuya, Uraraka reported, her face pale. A bullet train is approaching at 200 kilometers per hour. It won't be able to stop in time. A third team is attacking the network's main power station, Deku added, his eyes scanning the incoming reports. They're trying to cause a citywide blackout. It was the initiative's first trial by fire. The HPSC's response was sluggish, disorganized. Heroes were being dispatched haphazardly, getting stuck in the very traffic chaos the Luddites had created. Tony stood at the head of the command table, a grim calm settling over him. This was his element. The chaos was just data. This is it, kids, he said, his voice cutting through the rising panic. Showtime. He began issuing orders with the speed and precision of a battlefield general. Ida, your family owns the rail network. You know the system. Get me a schematic of the Shinjuku Junction. I need a way to manually override the switches. Talk me through it, Uraraka, he continued, turning to her. Get suited up. You're on civilian evac. I'm sending 2 of my own drones with the gravity nets we designed. Get to Shibuya Station. Your job is to get people off that trap train and catch the debris. Do not engage the villains. Todoroki! Shota looked up, ready. The power station. The Luddites are trying to overload the primary reactor. Get there and cool it down. Create an ice barrier around the core. Buy us time. Bakugo! Tony's eyes met the explosive heroes over the console. You're my cavalry. You're the fastest one we have. I'm marking priority Luddite targets for you on your HUD. They're using tech, so your job is to break their toys. Hit them hard, hit them fast, but try not to blow up the evidence this time. We need to capture one of them. Finally! Bakugo roared, a savage grin on his face as he rocketed out of the tower's deployment bay. And Deku, Tony said, his gaze locking with his partner's. You're the field commander. You're the queen on the chessboard. You'll be wearing the new Mark II suit. May Hatsum wheeled out a stand bearing Deku's new costume. It was a dramatic evolution. The base was a dark, forest green armored fabric, with lines of circuitry glowing with a soft, emerald light. The gauntlets and boots were more streamlined, made of the same black nanocarbon as Bakugo's gear. The mask was a solid faceplate now, with a retractable mouthguard and a glowing green visor that would feed him real-time data from the CSC. It has an onboard 6 that helps regulate 1-for-all's output, May explained excitedly. It monitors your muscle tension and energy flow, shunting excess power into the suit's capacitors. It should give you finer control and reduce the strain on your body by at least 20%. Deku slipped into the suit. It felt like an extension of his own body. The moment he activated 1-for-all, the suit's visor lit up, and data scrolled across his vision. OFA output, 25%, systems, nominal, objective, coordinate team, protect civilians. He looked at Tony, who gave him a sharp nod. Go be a hero, kid. With a flash of green lightning, Deku was gone. The battle from Yuzurifu began. It was unlike any hero action the city had ever seen. It was a symphony of controlled power. From the tower, Tony was the conductor. Todoroki, the Luddites are reinforcing their position on your left flank. Create an ice wall, coordinates on your HUD now. Uraraka, the train is compromised. Use the net. I need you to lift the first 3 cars clear of the tracks. On the ground, Deku was the first violin, his voice a calm presence in his team's ears. Uraraka, I'm on my way to your position to help with evac. Ida, I need that manual override now. How do we stop those trains? There's a maintenance panel 1.5 kilometers down the north tunnel. Ida's voice crackled over the comms from the CSC. I'm guiding you now. Deku zipped through the tunnels, a green comet. He found the panel and, following Ida's precise instructions, rerouted the power, diverting the trains onto empty tracks with seconds to spare. In Shibuya, Uraraka, assisted by Tony's drones, deployed the massive gravity net. She made it weightless just as the bullet train slammed into the Luddites' trap. Instead of a catastrophic crash, the derailed front cars were caught in the shimmering net, their momentum bleeding away harmlessly as she gently lowered them to the ground. Bakugo was a hurricane of controlled destruction. He descended on the Luddite teams like a wrathful god, his new gauntlets allowing him to unleash a barrage of precise, powerful AP shots that disabled their gear without leveling the city. He cornered a team at the power station just as Todoroki finished encasing the overloading reactor in a mountain of ice. Nowhere to run, you damn extras! He roared. One of the Luddites, seeing they were beaten, raised his hands. But another, a lieutenant, aimed a strange-looking rifle at Bakugo. Before he could fire, a flash of green lightning and a tendril of black whip disarmed him, wrapping him in an unbreakable cage. Deku landed beside Bakugo, his new suit humming with power. We need him alive, Kaken! The crisis was over. The initiative had neutralized the city-wide threat with stunning efficiency. There were 0 casualties. Property damage, compared to a typical hero brawl, was practically non-existent, and the entire thing had been captured by Tony's PTI drones, broadcasting a clean, clear feed to a public that watched, mesmerized. They didn't just see heroes winning, they saw heroes working smart. As the police arrived to take the captured Luddites into custody, Deku and Tony stood over the captured lieutenant. Tony knelt, his eyes scanning the villain's disabled gear. He pulled the rifle from the ground. Interesting, Tony murmured, examining the weapon. It was a kinetic energy dampener. He popped open a panel on its side, revealing the power cell within. His face went grim. Deku, look at this, he said. Deku knelt beside him. The power cell was a crude, unstable version of an arc reactor, but that wasn't what caught Tony's eye. Etched into the casing, almost too small to see, was a serial number and a logo. It wasn't a Luddite symbol. It was a stylized hawk's wing inside a gear, the official logo of the HPSC's now-defunct Black Ops RD division, a division that had supposedly been shut down years ago after a scandal involving illegal quirk experimentation. Tony held up the device, his expression unreadable. "This isn't just based on my tech," he said, his voice cold as ice. "The energy signature, the specific alloy in the casing. This is a direct copy. Someone didn't just steal my notes." He looked at Deku, the full, horrifying weight of the conspiracy finally crashing down on them. "Someone has been stealing my tech from my own damn universe." The calm before the storm was a peculiar kind of quiet. It was the low, electric hum of a city holding its breath. In the centralized strategic command of the Hero Initiative Tower, that hum was literal. Racks of freshly installed servers thrummed with latent potential, their indicator lights blinking in a steady, rhythmic pulse. The main holographic map of the greater Tokyo area floated in the center of the room, a placid, cool blue, its myriad data streams flowing in orderly, peaceful lines. The core team of the initiative was assembled, caught in a strange limbo between preparation and anticipation. Ida was meticulously calibrating the CSC's comms network, muttering about signal degradation and latency. Uraraka was running diagnostics on her new rescue drones, her expression a mask of concentration. Todoroki stood by the panoramic window, his quiet presence a stark contrast to the city's restless energy. Bakugo, meanwhile, was impatiently flexing his fingers, the sleek, dark metal of his new gauntlets seeming to itch with the need for action. Deku stood beside Tony at the head of the command table, his eyes fixed on the tranquil blue map. His new suit felt like a second skin, the internal microcircuitry a faint, comforting warmth against his own thrumming power. He could feel one for all, not as a raging inferno, but as a controlled, coiled spring, the suit's regulators acting as a gentle hand on the reins. "It's too quiet," Deku murmured, the sentiment of a soldier who had learned to distrust peace. Tony took a slow sip of his coffee. The mug was new, a custom job from May that read, "I make cool stuff. He makes it cooler. Don't worry, kid. They'll make their move." Groups like this, these Luddites, they're zealots. They live for the grand gesture. They won't stay in the shadows for long. As if summoned by his words, the world broke. The first alarm wasn't a sound. It was a color. A violent, angry red that bled across the holographic map, originating from the dense urban heart of the city. Then came the sound, a cacophony of sirens, a chorus of digital screams as a dozen emergency systems went critical at once. "What is it?" Uraraka asked, spinning around from her console. Ida's fingers flew across his keyboard, his face paling. "It's the transport network. Multiple incidents, all simultaneous. It's a coordinated attack." The serene blue map dissolved into a constellation of crisis alerts. Icons representing train collisions, power failures, and structural damage flared to life like angry red stars. Tony's coffee mug hit the table with a sharp click. The casual inventor was gone, replaced instantly by the seasoned strategist, the man who had stared down alien invasions. "Report! Talk to me, people! What are we looking at?" Ida's voice was tense, but precise. "Prong 1, an electromagnetic pulse has been detonated at the Shinjuku Central Switching Station. The entire automated system is down. FRID-wise, projections show 3 commuter trains on the Yamanote line are on a direct collision course. Impact in T-7 minutes. Prong 2, Uraraka added, her own screen flashing. A high-tensile net, military grade, has been deployed across the Rainbow Bridge. A bullet train is approaching. It cannot stop in time, and the bridge is packed with rush-hour traffic. They've turned it into a cage." "Prong 3, Todoroki said, his voice a low, cold monotone as he pointed to a different sector. "The Ariake Power Substation. Luddite forces have breached the perimeter and are attempting to overload the primary reactor. If they succeed, they'll black out half the city. And they're not done," Deku said, his eyes wide as he processed the flood of intel from his own tactical display. "They've severed the main track of the Yurikamome elevated monorail. One car is dangling over the bay, 60 meters up, packed with civilians." It was a masterstroke of chaos, a perfectly executed plan designed to splinter and overwhelm any conventional response. The HPSC would be sending heroes to each location individually, where they would arrive too late, their efforts isolated and ineffective. It was a test, A brutal, city-wide examination, and the Stark Midoriya Initiative was the only one with the answer sheet. Tony's eyes scanned the maelstrom of data, a flicker of something that looked like excitement in their depths. This was not chaos to him. It was a complex, multivariable equation, and he was born to solve it. "This is it, kids," he said, his voice cutting through the rising panic with the sharp edge of command. "This is where we show them the difference between a hero and a first responder. This is where we show them what a real hero's society looks like. Showtime." He pointed a finger at Ida. "Ingenium! Your family practically built the Japanese rail system. You know the guts of the Yamanote line better than anyone. Get me a hardline schematic of the Shinjuku Junction. I need a manual override for the track switches, and I need it yesterday. You're my eyes in the machine." Ida straightened up, his panic replaced by a surge of purpose. "Immediately! I can access the original blueprints through my family's private servers." Tony's gaze snapped to Uraraka. "Uravity! Get suited up. You are on civilian rescue and containment at the monorail. Prioritize the dangling car. My personal transport drone, call it Dummy 2, is en route to your position with 3 deployable gravity nets. Get those people on solid ground. After that, get to the Rainbow Bridge. Your job is not to fight. It is to save. Is that clear, Crystal?" Uraraka said, already running for the deployment bay, her face set with grim determination. "Todoroki!" Shoto met his gaze, unflinching. "The power station. They want to make it go boom. You are going to make it go cold. Forget the Luddites. Your target is the reactor. Encase it. Freeze it. Do whatever you have to do to prevent a meltdown. Buy us time." Todoroki simply nodded, a silent promise, and was already moving, a trail of frost forming in his wake. Tony's eyes found Bakugo, who was vibrating with barely suppressed energy, a predatory grin spreading across his face. "Dynamite! You're my hammer. I'm uploading the Luddites' tactical positions to your HUD right now. They're attacking the bridge supports on the Rainbow Bridge to ensure maximum chaos. You are going to introduce them to your own special brand of chaos. Hit them hard, hit them fast. Break their toys. But I want one of them alive, you hear me? We need intel. Try, and I know this is a big ask, not to vaporize the evidence. Just point me at the bastards." Bakugo roared, his new gauntlets flaring to life. He didn't even wait for the elevator, launching himself straight out of the tower's main deployment bay like a human missile, a triumphant scream echoing behind him. Finally, Tony turned to Deku. The command center felt strangely empty with the others gone. It was just the two of them, the architect and his champion. "Deku, you're the field commander," Tony said, his voice lowering, becoming more serious. "You are the connective tissue. The others have their missions, but you are the one who sees the whole board. Your suit is linked directly to the CSC. You'll get every piece of data I get. Your job is to fill the gaps, to be where you're needed most. You're not a brawler today, kid. You're a leader." Deku took a deep breath, the air humming through his mass filtration system. He felt the weight of the responsibility, but it wasn't the crushing, solitary weight of his vigilante days. It was the solid, reassuring weight of a key component in a machine built for victory. He looked at the frantic map, no longer seeing chaos, but objectives. "I understand," he said. "Good." Tony nodded. "Now go be a hero." With a thought, Deku channeled 30% of One for All. Green lightning exploded around him, but it didn't crackle wildly. It flowed in controlled, elegant lines along the circuitry of his suit. The world sharpened, time seemed to slow, and with a single, powerful leap, he launched himself from the tower, a green comet streaking across the troubled sky. Location: Yurikamon Line, over Tokyo Bay. Hero Uravity. Objective: civilian rescue. Achiko Uraraka's heart hammered against her ribs as she soared through the air, her descent controlled by short, precise bursts from her boot jets. Below her, the scene was one of pure terror. The monorail car hung precariously, its front half sheared away, held only by a few groaning, sparking cables. Inside, she could see the terrified faces of men, women, and children, pressed against the glass. "Uravity, Dummy 2 is on station and awaiting your command," Tony's voice crackled in her ear. She saw it then, a sleek, Stark Industries grey drone hovering silently nearby, 3 large pods attached to its underside. Deploying Net 1, she commanded, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. A pod detached and shot towards the water below the dangling car. It burst open, deploying a massive, circular net of shimmering, golden energy that spread out to cover an area the size of a football field. Net in position. I'm going in, she said. Using her quirk on herself, she floated down towards the open maw of the monorail car. As she neared, she could hear the screaming. Everyone, listen to me! She shouted, her voice amplified by her helmet. My name is Uravity. I'm a pro-hero. I'm going to get you all out of here, but you have to stay calm. She touched the edge of the car's broken floor. Release! The metal groaned as gravity was momentarily stripped from it, relieving the strain on the remaining cables. She began to systematically move through the car, tapping each passenger on the shoulder. One by one, they became weightless, their terror turning to wide-eyed astonishment as they floated in the air. Now jump! She ordered. There's a safety net below. Jump! One by one they did, their falls slow and gentle as they drifted down into the waiting arms of the golden energy net. It was a sight straight out of a fantasy, a rescue operation of impossible grace. From the docks, the public, and the live-streaming PTI drones, watched in awe. This wasn't the brutal, destructive combat they were used to seeing. This was something else. This was heroism as an act of pure salvation. Location, Ariake Power Substation. Hero, Shoto. Objective, containment. Shoto Todoroki moved through the power station like a ghost. The Luddites, clad in their blank white masks, were focused on the station's main reactor, attaching strange devices to its conduits, trying to force a meltdown. They paid him no mind until it was too late. They didn't see him as a threat. They saw him as the son of Endeavor, a hero of fire and fury. They were wrong. Shoto didn't use his fire. He placed his right palm on the concrete floor. Target, primary reactor core. Initiate flash freeze. He murmured, less to himself and more to the comlink. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of ice, thick and crystalline, surged from him, not as a crude wall, but as a complex, branching structure. It flowed like a living glacier, encasing conduits, reinforcing walls, and converging on the reactor core. The air temperature dropped by 50 degrees in seconds. The Luddites' devices, not built for such extreme cold, sparked and died. The reactor, which had been glowing an angry red, was now encased in a tomb of translucent blue ice, its critical warning alarms falling silent one by one. The Luddites turned, finally realizing their mistake, raising their weapons. But before they could fire, another wall of ice erupted from the ground, separating them from the reactor, trapping them in the courtyard. Shoto stood on the other side of the ice wall, his breath misting in the frigid air, his mission complete. He had not thrown a single punch. He had simply changed the environment, ending the threat with overwhelming, strategic power. Location, Rainbow Bridge. Hero, Dynamite. Objective, offensive assault. Yes! 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 Bakugo screamed with joyous rage as he descended upon the Rainbow Bridge. Below him, the Luddites were like ants, planting explosive charges on the bridge's support cables. Dynamite, I'm marking 4 primary targets on your HUD. Ida's crisp, clear voice came over the comms from the CSC. They are planting thermite charges on the main suspension cables. You must disable them before they can be armed. Consider M disabled. Bakugo snarled. He didn't use a wide-angle explosion. That was the old him. The new him was a precision instrument of destruction. He angled his new gauntlet. AP shot! A concentrated needle of explosive force shot from his palm. It wasn't a huge blast, just a sharp, supersonic crack. The first Luddite was thrown from his perch, his charge flying from his hands before Bakugo caught him and his gear with a passing swoop, unceremoniously dumping him and the disabled tech in a pile for the authorities. The second shot ricocheted off the bridge's structure, guided by a targeting solution from the CSC, and disabled a Luddite's weapon from 100 yards away. He was a whirlwind of controlled violence. He moved with a speed and grace he never had before. the gyroscopic stabilizers in his gauntlets absorbing the recoil and allowing him to fire and change direction in midair. It felt less like fighting and more like dancing. A very, very violent dance. He took out the remaining Luddites on the bridge supports in under a minute, disabling their equipment, and corralling them with small, non-lethal concussive blasts that herded them like sheep. The public, trapped in their cars on the bridge, watched in stunned silence. They were used to seeing dynamite as a walking natural disaster. Today, they were seeing a special forces operator. Location, various. Hero, DKU. Objective, field command. Deku was everywhere. His mind was a nexus of information, his body a tool to be deployed with absolute precision. Deku, Ida here! I have found the manual override for the Yamanote line. It is located in a maintenance tunnel, designation 7B. However, the entrance is sealed by a collapsed wall. I am sending you the structural schematics now. Deku, already en route, saw the schematics appear in his visor. He landed before the wall of rubble, and for a moment, the old instinct flared, to smash it with 100% of his power. But the new instinct, the one honed by Tony and the suit, took over. Minimum force for maximum effect, he thought. He saw the key stress points highlighted in his HUD. FA Gene 2 steps. 1 for all, 45%. He didn't throw a wild punch. He delivered 3 sharp, precise strikes to the points Ida's schematics had indicated. St. Louis smash. The wall didn't explode. It crumbled, collapsing inwards, opening a perfect path. He was inside the tunnel in seconds, following the data stream to the override panel. Deku, this is Uraraka. I have the monorail civilians secured, but the Luddites are attempting to flee by boat. I can't leave the evacuees. I'm on it, Deku said, his work at the train junction complete. He shot out of the tunnel and streaked towards the bay. He saw the Luddite speedboat cutting through the water. He didn't engage directly. Instead, he landed on the water's surface, channeling a 30% Delaware smash into the bay about 50 yards in front of the boat. The water erupted, not in a chaotic splash, but in a massive, targeted wave. The wall of water crashed over the speedboat, swamping its engine and sending it spinning harmlessly in the water, its occupants sputtering and soaked. It was a page right out of All Might's playbook, but executed with a strategist's mind. He was a leader. He wasn't just fighting the fires, he was directing the fire brigade. He moved from crisis to crisis, a green blur of support and reinforcement, his every action guided by the cool, calm voice of Tony Stark in his ear, coordinating the grand ballet of their counterattack. He was thinking about his vigilante days. Then, he had been a blunt instrument fueled by grief, trying to be a shield for the entire world. Now, he thought, as he saw the crisis alerts on the city map beginning to fade one by one, now we are a scalpel. The final confrontation took place at the base of the Rainbow Bridge. The main Luddite force, led by a hulking figure in heavier armor, the lieutenant, was cornered. They had been outmaneuvered at every turn. Their plan to create overwhelming chaos had been met with overwhelming competence. Nowhere to run, you tech freak losers! Bakugo's voice boomed as he landed in front of them, his gauntlets smoking with residual frost. The lieutenant raised a heavy-duty rifle, not at Bakugo, but at the bridge's main anchor point. If we can't have this city, no one can, he roared, preparing to fire a charge that would cripple the entire structure. He never got the chance. A blur of green and black slammed into him. It was Deku, moving faster than the eye could see. He didn't use a smash. He used Black Whip, the tendrils erupting from his back not as clumsy bludgeons, but as a swarm of precise, grasping ribbons of shadow. They wrapped around the lieutenant, pinning his arms, disarming his weapon, and lifting him into the air. It's over, Deku said, his voice calm, his glowing green visor reflecting the villain's own blank white mask. The rest of the Luddites dropped their weapons. They had been utterly, comprehensively defeated. The entire citywide assault, from the first EMP to the final capture, had lasted a total of 19 minutes. The aftermath was almost as impressive as the battle itself. As police began to arrive, taking the compliant, disarmed Luddites into custody, the initiative's work continued. Uraraka and her drones were gently lowering the monorail car to the ground. Todoroki was helping engineers stabilize the power station, using his ice with surgical precision. Bakugo, under Ida's remote guidance, was using small, controlled blasts to clear debris from the tracks. And the public watched it all. The PTI's live feed had been uninterrupted. They had seen every moment. They saw the calm coordination, the advanced technology, the focus on saving lives and preventing damage. They saw heroes working not as rivals, but as a team. They saw a group that didn't just react to disaster, but managed it. It was a paradigm shift in the public consciousness. This was the future Deku had promised. This was the blueprint made real. On social media, on news forums, the sentiment was unanimous. A single, awestruck question repeated over and over. This is what heroes can be. Back at the base of the bridge, Deku and a smirking Bakugo stood over the captured lieutenant, who was now bound securely in Aizawa's capture weapon, the underground hero having arrived with the police. Tony landed beside them, his own red and gold suit retracting with a soft whir. "Nicely done, kids," Tony said, a note of genuine pride in his voice. "Clean. Efficient. I'd give it a B." A little too much screaming from the blonde one. "Shut it, tin can!" Bakugo snarled, though there was no real heat in it. Tony ignored him, his attention drawn to the lieutenant's discarded rifle. He knelt, his brow furrowing. It was a sophisticated piece of equipment, a directed kinetic energy dampener. It was designed to stop a hero with super speed or super strength in their tracks. It was clever. And it was familiar. "Friday-chan, run a full-spectrum analysis on this thing," Tony murmured, picking up the weapon. He ran his thumb over the casing, feeling for a seam. He found a small panel and pried it open with a practiced ease, revealing the weapon's power source. It was a crude cylinder, wrapped in electrical tape and wires, but at its heart was a glowing, pulsating blue light. It was a miniature, poorly stabilized arc reactor. Tony's face went grim. The pride and relief of their victory evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. "Deku," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Take a look at this." Deku knelt beside him. He saw the makeshift reactor, the flickering blue light. But Tony's finger was pointing at something else. Etched into the side of the power cell's casing, almost hidden beneath a layer of grime, was a tiny logo. It wasn't the broken circuit board of the Luddites. It was a stylized hawk's wing inside a gear. Deku's blood ran cold. He recognized it from his obsessive hero studies. That's the emblem for the HPSC's old Applied Sciences division. The one they shut down for illegal experimentation. "It's more than that," Tony said, his voice barely a whisper. He held up a small diagnostic tool from his suit, scanning the device. The tool chirped, and a holographic display shimmered to life beside it, showing a complex elemental analysis. "The energy signature," Tony breathed, his eyes wide with a horrifying realization. "The specific isotope decay of the core element, the shielding material." He looked from the display to Deku, his face ashen. The conspiracy had just become infinitely larger, infinitely more personal. This wasn't just a case of stolen designs. This wasn't a local problem. This reached back into his own world, into his own past. "This isn't just based on my technology," he said, the words heavy with a terrible certainty. "The materials, the energy signature, this is a direct copy of the prototypes for the Mark VI arc reactor." He looked up at Deku, his eyes filled with a dawning, terrifying understanding. "The ones that were stolen from a secure transport 6 years ago. The ones we thought were lost forever." He held up the crude power cell, the source of their enemy's strength, the key to the entire conspiracy. "Someone didn't just steal my notes," Tony Stark whispered, the truth landing like a physical blow. "Someone has been stealing technology from my own damn universe."